One of the things we've seen as a company, as a 180-year-old company, we've seen lots of changes in trade, lots of changes in political issues come up throughout the years.
John Deere and former President Donald Trump have recently found themselves locked in a high-stakes clash that speaks volumes about the intersection of American manufacturing, trade policy, and political theater. What began as a campaign trail proclamation of tariffs has evolved into a broader debate over national identity, globalization, and the future of agribusiness in the United States. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. At the heart of the dispute is John Deere's decision, announced in June 2024, to move certain less complex manufacturing operations from its sprawling U.S. facilities to Mexico by the close of 2026. The company, which has long prided itself on its Midwestern roots and its multi-billion-dollar investment in American plants, argued that shifting some production abroad would allow its U.S. factories to focus on higher-value activities and advanced equipment assembly. With more than $2 billion invested in domestic factories and a workforce of tens of thousands at home, Deere maintained that offshoring select tasks was a strategic necessity rather than a betrayal of its heritage. Yet when Donald Trump spotted one of those iconic green tractors used as stage props during a September 2024 rally in Smithton, Pennsylvania, he seized the moment. Pausing mid-speech, he warned John Deere, "If you move production to Mexico, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything you export to the United States." It was classic Trump, theatrical, uncompromising, and calculated to resonate with farmers anxious about job losses and weakening rural economies. His threat was not an offhand remark. It was a message to every C-suite executive contemplating relocation of U.S. operations, and to voters wary of the hollowing out of American industry. In the weeks that followed, Deere's spokespeople stayed largely silent, preferring to point back to their long-term commitment to U.S. manufacturing and to underscore that any shifts would preserve core domestic employment. Our strategy is about optimizing our global footprint to sustain competitiveness while continuing to grow our business at home, one company statement emphasized. Behind closed doors, however, Deere's executives were undoubtedly weighing the legal, financial, and reputational risks of defying a former president who remains a formidable force in Republican politics. Trump's threat of punitive tariffs was steep by any measure. A 200% duty on Deere's exports would effectively shut off much of the company's U.S. market for equipment produced in Mexico, rendering any cost savings from lower wage assembly moot. Moreover, it would risk sparking a broader trade war, hitting farmers whose livelihoods depend on selling tractors, combines, and other machinery, not to mention potential retaliatory measures against U.S. agricultural exports. Indeed, Trump himself has vowed to strong-arm China into buying $50 billion of U.S. farm goods if re-elected, a promise that underscores his willingness to use tariffs as levers of geopolitical bargaining. Critics of Trump's approach argue that such tariff threats are both legally dubious and economically self-defeating. Under World Trade Organization rules and bilateral trade agreements, unilateral penalties on a single company would face immediate challenges. And from a macroeconomic standpoint, tariffs raise input costs across sectors, reduce competition, and ultimately burden American consumers and businesses. In Davenport, Iowa, for instance, local manufacturers and farmers have already felt the sting of Trump-era steel and aluminum tariffs, which drove up costs for intermediate goods and forced companies to absorb narrower profit margins. John Deere's predicament also illuminates the modern complexity of global supply chains. While headlines often frame offshoring as a simple choice between U.S. and foreign, the reality is that sophisticated machinery relies on components sourced and processed across multiple countries. Even if Deere retains its final assembly lines in the United States, sub-assemblies, electronics, hydraulics, and software modules may come from suppliers in Mexico, Europe, or Asia. A blanket tariff would thus risk ensnaring American-made value in its net, raising costs for all manufacturers and undermining domestic competitiveness. Meanwhile, Deere has its own leverage. The company is widely regarded as an industrial icon, a byword for reliability and quality in farm equipment. Threatening to cripple the ability of rural customers to purchase the very machines needed for planting and harvesting is politically risky. Many congressional Republicans, particularly those representing agriculture-heavy districts, have expressed discomfort with Trump's hardline stance. They recognize that alienating a key supplier of farm machinery could backfire in the next election cycle just as swiftly as striking a populist chord. As the 2024-25 political calendar unfolds, both sides appear keen to sharpen their appeals. Trump continues to feature John Deere imagery at campaign events, framing himself as the defender of the Farm Belt against outsourcing and corporate neglect. Deere, for its part, has ramped up communications highlighting local hiring, capital expenditures in American factories, and partnerships with community colleges to train the next generation of skilled workers. In a recent earnings call, CEO John May reassured investors that, despite global pressures, our commitment to U.S. industry remains steadfast and will continue to shape our investment decisions. Yet beneath the rhetoric lies a deeper tension over how America defines economic patriotism. Is it about keeping every bolt and gear within domestic borders at any cost? Or is it about preserving high-value design, engineering, and final assembly while allowing more routine tasks to migrate where they can be done most efficiently? This debate is not unique to Deere. It echoes across aerospace, automotive, electronics, and consumer goods. The outcome will shape not only corporate strategies, but also national policy on trade, industrial subsidies, and workforce development. In late April 2025, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission filed an antitrust lawsuit against John Deere over its restrictions on independent repair services. While not directly tied to Trump's tariff threats, the FTC's action adds another layer to the company's legal challenges. Farmers and small repair shops have long complained that Deere's proprietary software locks out third-party mechanics, forcing them to rely on expensive dealer services. The FTC argues this practice stifles competition and harms rural communities with limited access to authorized service centers. For Trump, who champions anti-monopoly rhetoric and pro-consumer protections, the lawsuit offers additional political leverage. Looking ahead, the clash between John Deere and Donald Trump may hinge on several key variables. First, the outcome of the 2024 presidential election will determine who occupies the Oval Office come January 2025 and sets the administration's trade agenda. A Trump victory could embolden tariff measures, although any real-world imposition would require navigating international trade agreements and facing legal challenges at the WTO. A Biden re-election, by contrast, would likely maintain a more multilateral approach, emphasizing negotiation over unilateral penalties. Second, Deere's own capital investments will signal its long-term strategy. Will the company proceed with its announced Mexican relocation by 2026, or will it revise its plans in response to political and public pressure? To date, Deere has not announced any cancellations, suggesting that it still views offshoring as strategically necessary. However, the pace of automation, reshoring incentives, and evolving supply chain dynamics could open new pathways for onshore manufacturing. Third, farmer sentiment will matter. At the end of the day, Deere's customers are the ultimate judges. If rural America perceives that tariff threats or legal battles are impeding their access to critical equipment or driving up costs, the backlash could be swift. Conversely, if farmers see that Deere continues to invest locally and maintain product quality, they may view Trump's interventions as grandstanding rather than substantive policy. The increasingly fraught dynamic between John Deere and Donald Trump has spurred a broader conversation about the nature of corporate citizenship in the 21st century. Stakeholders on all sides are probing what it truly means for an American icon to honor its heritage, serve its customers, and remain competitive on the global stage. To appreciate the depths of this debate, one must consider not only the immediate conflict over tariffs and plants, but also the historical, technological, and social currents that have shaped both John Deere's evolution and the political rhetoric it now confronts. John Deere's roots stretch back to 1837, when a blacksmith named John Deere fashioned the first successful steel plow blade capable of slicing through sticky Midwestern soil. From that singular invention emerged a company that would come to symbolize American ingenuity, entrepreneurship, and the relentless drive to conquer new frontiers. Over nearly 2 centuries, Deere & Company expanded from hand-forged plows to a sprawling portfolio of tractors, combines, precision agriculture systems, and financial services. Its distinctive green and yellow machines became ubiquitous on corn and soybean fields, emblematic of rural prosperity and the promise of domestication rendered possible by mechanization. Yet even as its brand identity remained rooted in the mythos of the American heartland, John Deere quietly built a global supply network stretching from manufacturing hubs in Germany and Brazil to parts distribution centers in Asia and Europe. By the early 2000s, Deere was sourcing critical components, hydraulic pumps from Mexico, electronics from China, and transmissions from India, that would be assembled into finished tractors in Illinois or Iowa. This decentralization allowed Deere to tap into specialized expertise, reduce costs, and mitigate risks associated with currency fluctuations or regional disruptions. It was a far cry from the vertical integration favored by steel barons of an earlier era, yet it reflected the realities of a world in which value chains spanned continents and agility became a key competitive advantage. The tension between place-based identity and dispersed operations intensified amid the post-2008 drive for operational efficiency. To maintain margins in the face of fluctuating commodity prices and volatile input costs, Deere employed advanced robotics, lean manufacturing techniques, and data-driven forecasting. Factories that once hummed with assembly line workers now boasted collaborative robots side by side with human technicians, each playing specialized roles in welding, paint applications, or quality inspections. Sophisticated machine vision systems flagged defects in real time, while just-in-time inventory strategies slashed warehousing expenses. These innovations strengthened Deere's bottom line, but they also fueled debates about the social contract between corporations, workers, and the communities that host sprawling manufacturing campuses. Against this backdrop, Donald Trump's rhetorical gambit seized a powerful cultural current. The anxiety, legitimate or not, that globalization has hollowed out industrial regions, leaving behind ghost towns in places where once vibrant factories thrived. His pledge to impose draconian tariffs on any equipment moved abroad tapped into the enduring allure of protectionism, offering a simple narrative of redressing past injustices by shielding domestic production. Yet few paused to wrestle with the economic intricacies inherent in a modern manufacturer's decision-making calculus. How much of a machine's value truly lies in its final assembly? Would punitive tariffs actually repatriate jobs and investment? Or would they merely distort supply chains and spark retaliatory measures from trading partners? In the court of public opinion, the Trump-Deere saga has animated diverse constituencies. For some farmers, the sight of a former president denouncing offshoring served as a rallying cry, a token of recognition that their livelihoods matter in national policy debates. Grassroots collectives organized town hall meetings, inviting local Deere dealers to share their perspectives on supply chain resilience and equipment lead times. One Iowa corn grower, speaking anonymously to a regional newspaper, confessed that he welcomed any pressure on Deere to keep the factories humming here, even if the real impact on output would be marginal. It's about making a point, he said, that rural America can't just be taken for granted. Yet other producers took a more pragmatic stance. They recognized that tractors and combines incorporate highly specialized software, precision GPS technology, and telematics systems that often rely on global software teams and firmware updates delivered via cloud platforms. A 200 horsepower tractor might bear the John Deere logo on its hood, but its navigation algorithms could be developed in Silicon Valley or Bangalore. For these stakeholders, the paramount concern was uptime, the guarantee that their machinery would perform seamlessly during critical planting and harvest windows. Excessive politicization, they feared, risked creating supply bottlenecks, increasing parts costs, and hampering Deere's ability to roll out software upgrades that boost yield efficiency or reduce fuel consumption. Meanwhile, laboratory benches far from Iowa and Illinois were quietly sketching the contours of agriculture's next revolution. Agritech startups, buoyed by venture capital, have been testing fleets of autonomous tractors equipped with machine learning systems capable of mapping field topography, identifying weeds, and adjusting seeding depths on the fly. Drones fitted with multispectral cameras survey crop health from above, flagging nutrient deficiencies while generating data that feed into Deere's burgeoning precision ag division. Biotech firms engineer drought-resistant seeds, while soil science companies deploy sensors that monitor moisture and microbial activity in real time. All of these advances hinge on a global cadre of engineers, material scientists, and data analysts collaborating across time zones. John Deere sits at the nexus of this innovation ecosystem, licensing software from Israeli firms, partnering with robotics labs in Europe, and sponsoring agricultural research at universities in China. Trump's edict to repatriate production risked upending this collaborative tapestry. A strict insistence on localized manufacturing could buttress assembly line jobs in the short term, but might inadvertently sever ties to specialized suppliers overseas. The company's engineers in Germany, for instance, are leaders in precision hydraulics, technology that amplifies a tractor's lifting capacity and reduces fuel consumption. Attempting to replicate that know-how domestically without an existing talent pool could prove both costly and time-consuming. Similarly, Deere's partnership with a South Korean software startup to refine its telematics platform enabled real-time diagnostics that slash downtime. Mandating that all software development occur on U.S. soil would complicate that arrangement. To forestall such fractures, Deere's leadership has increasingly adopted a narrative of competitive patriotism. This approach reframes domestic investment not as an end in itself, but as part of a holistic strategy that combines global collaboration with localized impact. In communities hosting Deere facilities, the company has expanded apprenticeship programs, working with vocational schools to teach robotics maintenance, additive manufacturing techniques, and cybersecurity for smart machinery. It has funneled grants into ag tech accelerators, supporting startups that address soil conservation, water management, and carbon sequestration. What John Deere sells, the argument goes, is not merely steel frames and diesel engines, but an integrated suite of solutions that boost farmers' productivity, sustainability, and resilience. Such positioning resonates with a growing body of consumers who prioritize environmental stewardship and social responsibility when choosing brands. Agribusinesses increasingly face pressure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, minimize water usage, and implement regenerative practices that replenish soil organic matter. John Deere's strategic investments in electric machinery, a segment still nascent but gathering momentum, signal its willingness to chart a cleaner path forward. Last year, the company unveiled a prototype fully electric zero-turn mower, showcasing battery technology partnerships with firms in Sweden and Canada. These collaborations underline that innovation often flourishes at the intersection of diverse geographies and regulatory environments. On the political front, Trump's post-rhetoric maneuvers have been intriguing. Despite his public threats, he has so far refrained from formally proposing a tariff specifically targeting John Deere in any policy platform. His campaign advisors recognized that draconian duties would require legislative or administrative processes fraught with legal and diplomatic hurdles. Instead, Trump has kept the issue alive through social media blasts and rally soundbites, ensuring that his base perceives him as the uncompromising champion of manufacturing jobs. This strategy amplifies his broader critique of globalist elites, while affording him plausible deniability that any actual policy implementation would be unworkable. The Biden administration, for its part, has watched the unfolding drama with measured concern. The White House has emphasized the importance of strengthening domestic manufacturing through incentives, such as the CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, rather than through punitive measures. Subsidies for advanced manufacturing hubs, tax credits for clean energy equipment, and funding for workforce development present an alternative paradigm, one wherein the federal government partners with industry to build capacity rather than wielding tariffs as blunt instruments. President Biden, in remarks at a manufacturing summit last year, praised companies that choose to invest in America, while acknowledging that we live in an interconnected world, and our competitiveness depends on global partnerships. However, the administration has also made clear that it expects large corporations to exercise restraint in their offshoring decisions. Through the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States CFIUS and other regulatory bodies, the federal government has signaled increased scrutiny of transactions that could undermine national security or critical supply chains. Agricultural equipment, given its importance to food security and rural livelihoods, sits squarely within that purview. Deere's leadership must therefore navigate a delicate path, satisfying shareholder demands for efficiency responding to political imperatives for job preservation, and aligning with federal incentives designed to bolster strategic industries. Beyond politics and economics, the John Deere-Trump standoff raises deeper questions about identity and narrative. Both entities wield powerful storytelling machinery. Trump's brand thrives on populist drama, casting himself as the outsider who will raise establishment norms and restore bygone glories. John Deere's brand, by contrast, has historically emphasized steady reliability, generational continuity, and the quiet dignity of labor. Now, Deere is crafting a new chapter, one that emphasizes technological leadership, environmental accountability, and community engagement. The outcome of this narrative tussle will shape how both rural and urban audiences perceive the role of American industry in solving global challenges. From a legal standpoint, the specter of tariffs has also prompted Deere to revisit its trade compliance protocols and risk modeling frameworks. Legal teams are mapping out potential WTO disputes, calculating the likelihood of Mexico or other trading partners launching counterclaims. At the same time, Deere's Treasury Department is reevaluating currency hedging strategies. If peso-denominated assembly costs suddenly become subject to hefty U.S. duties, how might that affect profit and loss projections and cash flow hedges? These behind-the-scenes adjustments underscore that corporate decisions are not only matters of brand positioning or political posturing. They are deeply intertwined with sophisticated financial and legal analysis. Industry analysts are watching for signs that other manufacturers might follow Deere's lead, or alternatively, for evidence that Trump's rhetoric will deter offshoring. In recent weeks, executives at rival firms such as Case IH and New Holland have been queried about their plans. Some have hinted at similar production-optimizing moves, while others have emphasized the advantages of maintaining a domestic footprint for certain product lines. The aggregation of these corporate strategies will chart a map of American manufacturing's next decade. Will it consolidate around advanced centers of excellence, or will it disperse in search of lower-cost assembly opportunities? Perhaps most importantly, the John Deere-Trump saga highlights how political theater can influence real-world outcomes. A rally stage prop, a green tractor became the flashpoint for a conflict that extends across silos of engineering, finance, law, and community relations. It demonstrated that symbols can carry outsized power, that a single threat, voiced in the charged atmosphere of a campaign event, can force corporations to reconsider investments, policymakers to weigh legal options, and farmers to reassess their relationships with suppliers. As the debate continues, one fact remains indelible. Neither John Deere nor Donald Trump operates in a vacuum. They are enmeshed in a global network of technology, capital, talent, and policy. Any attempt to separate America from the world would risk unraveling the very systems that have enabled higher crop yields, more sustainable practices, and economic growth. The challenge for all involved is to craft policies and practices that honor local communities without forsaking the collaborative spirit that drives innovation. The saga surrounding John Deere and Donald Trump has also ignited an unexpected conversation about the role of data sovereignty in agricultural technology. As farming equipment becomes ever more connected, feeding streams of telematics data into cloud platforms, enabling predictive maintenance, and facilitating remote software updates, it raises critical questions about who controls and benefits from the vast quantities of information generated on American farms. Deere's data centers, some located domestically and others abroad, process yield maps, engine performance logs, and geospatial soil analyses. Policymakers concerned with national security have begun scrutinizing whether such sensitive datasets might be subject to foreign jurisdiction, intellectual property leakage, or exploitation by adversarial actors. In response, Deere has accelerated plans to host an increasing share of ag data on U.S. soil, fortified by end-to-end encryption and multi-factor authentication. Yet this transition demands significant capital and expertise, underscoring again the tension between safeguarding domestic interests and leveraging global cloud computing innovations. Beyond data, labor dynamics on Deere's factory floors have become a focal point of scrutiny. While automation technologies can reduce reliance on manual labor, they also shift workforce needs toward more technically skilled positions. Deere's human resources teams have partnered with regional economic development agencies to forecast the skill profiles required in 2030. Robotics programmers, data analysts fluent in machine learning frameworks, and maintenance technicians adept at troubleshooting advanced control systems. To fill these roles, Deere is sponsoring scholarships at state universities and community colleges, offering internships that pair students with senior engineers on live production line projects. These initiatives, while laudable, have provoked debate in some quarters. Critics argue that they prioritize white-collar tech jobs over preserving blue-collar livelihoods, potentially widening socioeconomic gulfs in rural communities. Deere counterpoints that its upskilling programs include pathways for existing employees to transition into new roles, combining traditional mechanical expertise with digital competencies. Meanwhile, environmental advocates have weighed in on the John Deere-Trump conflict from an ecological standpoint. They note that tractors and combines are among the most significant non-point sources of greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture, accounting for fuel combustion and soil disturbance that releases carbon stored in the topsoil. Deere's leadership has responded by investing in more fuel-efficient diesel engines, experimenting with hydrogen fuel cell prototypes, and researching hybrid drivetrains that recapture kinetic energy during deceleration. In collaboration with European and Japanese partners, Deere is piloting a zero-emissions concept tractor that draws electricity from swappable battery packs produced in specialized plants in Scandinavia. Although these efforts sit at the experimental frontier, they illustrate how a company can leverage its global network to pilot technologies that might eventually be assembled or adapted domestically, a nuanced counterpoint to Trump's binary keep it here or else mantra. At the same time, geopolitical shifts have added new layers to Deere's strategic calculus. Supply chain disruptions triggered by unexpected crises, such as the recent conflicts in Eastern Europe and the blockades in critical shipping choke points, have spotlighted the vulnerability of long, internationally dependent component flows. Deere's executive leadership has undertaken a comprehensive resilience audit, mapping out Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers for key subsystems: microcontrollers from Southeast Asia, high-precision bearings from Europe, and specialty steel alloys from Japan. The audit's findings have prompted Deere to establish buffer inventories for critical items, diversify its roster of approved suppliers, and negotiate contingency agreements that guarantee surge capacity in times of stress. These measures, while prudent from a risk management perspective, further blur the distinction between domestic and foreign production, illustrating how modern manufacturing hinges on interwoven networks of expertise and capacity. On the political stage, interest groups beyond agriculture have chimed in. Labor unions representing factory workers in the automotive and aerospace sectors have expressed solidarity with Deere employees, viewing Trump's tariff threats as a slippery slope that could imperil unionized jobs elsewhere. Conversely, free market think tanks have criticized both Trump and Deere, arguing that heavy-handed government interventions, whether in the form of tariffs or industrial subsidies, distort competitive markets, stifle innovation, and ultimately harm consumers. These divergent perspectives have translated into lobby efforts in Washington, D.C., where Deere's advocacy team has been navigating an intricate web of congressional committees, regulatory agencies, and appropriations processes to secure favorable tax treatment and workforce development funding. The dance of corporate lobbying, political messaging, and grassroots activism underscores how the Deere-Trump conflict transcends a simple binary of jobs versus profits, becoming a microcosm of larger debates over the proper relationship between business, government, and society. Amid these high-level maneuvers, individual Deere dealers have adopted their own localized strategies. In certain Midwestern towns, independent dealerships have staged open houses, inviting farmers to inspect production samples, meet local assembly line foremen virtually via live streams, and learn firsthand about the distinctions between US-assembled and Mexico-assembled models. These events aim to reassure customers that regardless of origin, every tractor undergoes rigorous quality testing to ensure parity in performance and reliability. Dealers have also bundled service contracts that guarantee parts availability even in the event of future trade disruptions. Such grassroots efforts reflect the reality that for customers what ultimately matters is uptime, service responsiveness, and total cost of ownership, not the geopolitical flashpoints that animate national headlines. Educational institutions have likewise become arenas of engagement. Agricultural colleges have hosted symposiums featuring panels with Deere executives, trade policy scholars, and former administration officials to dissect the multifaceted trade-offs at play. Students in these programs have been invited to propose policy white papers, modeling outcomes under scenarios ranging from blanket tariffs to targeted reshoring incentives. These academic exercises not only inform future policymakers and industry leaders, but also enrich public discourse by injecting data-driven projections into a debate too often dominated by political spin. Technological convergence promises to further complicate the John Deere Trump narrative. The rise of blockchain as a means of verifying equipment provenance, ensuring parts authenticity, and streamlining warranty claims could decentralize trust mechanisms in ways that transcend national borders. Quantum computing advances may revolutionize simulation models used in equipment design and predictive maintenance. Even developments in materials science, such as the introduction of biocomposite plastics or 3D printed metal alloys, could reshape the very composition of tractors, altering supply chain maps in unexpected ways. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the John Deere and Trump situation? What do you expect next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.